The evening had started quietly, almost peacefully. The studio dorm was empty, the kind of silence that only existed after midnight when schedules ended and exhaustion settled into the walls. Rain tapped steadily against the window, soft but persistent, like a memory that refused to stay buried. Taehyung sat alone at the desk, laptop open, scrolling through folders he'd memorized years ago. He was supposed to be looking for a demo file. Jungkook had promised to finish it before rehearsal, and Taehyung needed it by morning. Nothing more, nothing personal. At least, that's what he told himself. Then he saw the folder. It was buried deep, misnamed, or maybe intentionally named to be ignored. Light's Final Mix MP3. There was no music inside. Just one file. A video. No thumbnail, no description, just a date and a size too large to be a mistake. Taehyung frowned, fingers hovering over the trackpad. Something in his chest tightened, a quiet instinct whispering that this wasn't meant for him. That clicking play would cross a line he couldn't uncross. He clicked it anyway. The screen flickered. The first frame froze, and Taehyung's breath caught painfully in his throat. Jungkook filled the screen. Not smiling, not performing, not the version the world knew. His face was close to the camera, eyes red and swollen, breathing uneven like he'd been crying for hours. His hair was a mess, his black hoodie faded and familiar, the one from their trainee days, the one he wore when he didn't want to be seen. "No, no," Taehyung whispered, his voice cracking. "What is this?" The video began to play. Jungkook sat in the old practice room, the lights dim, shadows pooling beneath his eyes. He didn't look at the camera right away. When he finally spoke, his voice trembled. "If you're watching this, it means I didn't get to say it to your face." Taehyung's heart slammed against his ribs. "I'm sorry," Jungkook continued. "I was a coward." Taehyung couldn't move. Every muscle locked in place as if his body understood before his mind did that this wasn't just a video. This was a goodbye. His fingers twitched toward the pause button, then froze midair. This wasn't meant for him. This was something private. Something hidden. And yet here it was. Jungkook ran a hand through his hair, fingers shaking. "There's so much I wanted to explain, so much I kept inside. I know leaving without telling you was the worst thing I could have done, but I wasn't strong enough to stay. Not after what happened, not after everything." Taehyung's vision blurred. Memories surged uninvited. Late nights that ended in silence. Conversations that stopped just short of honesty. The slow, painful distance that grew between them while neither of them said a word. He remembered the last time they stood alone together. Jungkook hadn't really looked at him. Not fully. There had always been something hidden behind his smile, something trembling just beneath the surface. And now this. Jungkook leaned forward in the frame, his voice breaking. "Do you remember the promise we made on the roof? You said no matter what happened, we'd tell each other the truth." Taehyung's breath hitched sharply. "I didn't," Jungkook admitted. "I lied, I smiled and said I was okay. I said I supported your decision, I said I didn't care." His eyes finally lifted to the camera, glassy and raw. "But it wasn't true, I cared too much, and it broke me." Taehyung stumbled backward, the back of his legs hitting the desk. "Why didn't you tell me?" he whispered, as if Jungkook could still hear him. The room felt smaller, the walls pressed in, heavy and unforgiving. On the screen, Jungkook smiled for the first time, but it wasn't the smile Taehyung knew. It was fragile, wounded. The kind that came after a storm had already destroyed everything. "I didn't want to be the reason you stayed," Jungkook said softly. "I wanted you to fly, to be free of the weight we were both carrying, so I stepped back, I let go." The words cut deep. Taehyung's knees gave out. He sank to the floor as the rain outside blurred into a distant, muffled sound beneath his sobs. He pressed a hand to his chest, gasping for air that wouldn't come. "Why hide this?" he cried. "Why didn't you say goodbye to me?" The video kept playing. "But if you're watching this," Jungkook whispered, "I guess you found out. I loved you. I didn't know how to handle that love without ruining everything, so I left." That word, loved, shattered something inside Taehyung that had been frozen for years. Every moment he'd ignored came flooding back. Late-night drives where their hands brushed but never held, glances that lingered too long, words that circled the truth but never touched it. Jungkook had pulled away slowly, blaming schedules, pressure, exhaustion. This video told a different story. "I was scared," Jungkook said. "You were always brighter, braver. I didn't want to be the one who dimmed your light." Taehyung crawled closer to the desk, tears streaming down his face. He pressed his palm against the screen as Jungkook's image faded into darkness. "No matter where I go," Jungkook whispered, "a part of me will always stay with you. Goodbye, T." The screen went black, and Taehyung broke. His sobs filled the room, raw and unrestrained. He curled into himself on the cold floor, arms wrapped around his body like he could hold himself together if he tried hard enough. He whispered Jungkook's name over and over, desperate, useless. The rain didn't stop. Minutes blurred into hours. The silence after the video felt louder than anything he'd ever heard. Somewhere in the haze of grief, a terrifying realization surfaced. He didn't know where Jungkook had gone. And for the first time, Taehyung was afraid that if he didn't move, if he didn't find him, he might already be too late. One moment he was on the floor, surrounded by silence and rain and the echo of Jungkook's voice. The next, he was gripping the edge of the desk so hard his knuckles burned, breath shaking as if his body had finally decided to move on instinct alone. The laptop screen was still black. That goodbye was still there. Hidden. Recorded. Left behind. This wasn't supposed to be like this, Taehyung whispered into the empty room. His phone buzzed somewhere behind him. Once, twice, again and again. He didn't look. The world outside that video felt unreal now, secondary, like everything that mattered had already happened inside those few minutes of recorded truth. Taehyung wiped his face with the sleeve of his hoodie, anger slowly rising beneath the grief. Not loud anger, not explosive, the kind that sharpened his thoughts and demanded answers. Why hide it? Why now? Why goodbye? He reopened the laptop and replayed the video. Once, twice, a third time. He stopped it at moments he hadn't noticed before. The way Jungkook's hands clenched tightly in his lap. The way his eyes flickered away from the camera, like he was afraid of being seen too clearly. The exhaustion carved into his face, deeper than any schedule could explain. "This wasn't planned," Taehyung murmured. "You were falling apart." He snapped the laptop shut. Enough. Silence was no longer an option. The hallway outside the studio dorm was dim, the overhead lights flickering softly as he stepped out. The building was mostly empty at this hour, but faint voices echoed from a lower floor, staff finishing late, unaware that something fragile was unraveling upstairs. Taehyung walked fast, footsteps sharp against the floor. He didn't slow down until he reached Jungkook's door. Locked. Of course it was. He knocked once, then again harder. "Jungkook," he said, voice tight, "open the door." Nothing. His jaw clenched. He knocked again, this time pounding. "I know you're here, don't do this." Silence answered him, heavy and deliberate. Taehyung leaned his forehead against the door, breathing hard. Memories flooded in uninvited. Jungkook opening the door before he even knocked. Complaining, smiling, letting him in anyway. Talking until dawn without realizing time had passed. "Don't shut me out again," Taehyung said hoarsely. "Not after this." A click. The door opened, just enough for Taehyung to see Jungkook standing there. His eyes were red, his face pale. He looked smaller somehow, stripped of the confident mask he wore so well. They stared at each other. Everything broke open. "You hit it," Taehyung said, pushing the door fully open. His voice wasn't loud, but it trembled with fury. "You hit a goodbye video like it was something you could bury and forget." Jungkook stepped back, swallowing. "You weren't supposed to find it." "That's your defense," Taehyung snapped. "That I wasn't supposed to know how much you were hurting." Jungkook's hands clenched at his sides. "I didn't want to hurt you." Taehyung laughed bitterly, the sound breaking halfway through. "Congratulations, you failed." The room felt suffocating. Words crowded the air, years of silence pressing in from every corner. Jungkook turned away, rubbing his face like he was trying to erase himself. "I thought it would be easier if you hated me." "Hated you?" Taehyung stepped closer, voice cracking. "You think watching you say goodbye like you were already gone would make me hate you?" Jungkook's shoulders shook. "I thought if you knew the truth, you'd stop me." Taehyung froze. "Stop you from what?" The silence stretched, taut and dangerous. Jungkook finally turned back, eyes glassy, voice barely above a whisper. "I was planning to leave, for good." The words landed like a blow. "For good how?" Taehyung demanded, heart pounding. "Where were you going?" "It doesn't matter." "It matters to me," Taehyung shouted, the sound echoing off the walls. "Everything you do matters to me, and you don't get to decide that alone." Jungkook flinched, tears spilling freely now. "That's the problem, you always mattered too much." Taehyung grabbed the front of Jungkook's hoodie, fingers trembling. "You don't get to disappear and call it love." Jungkook didn't resist. He looked up, eyes raw and unguarded. "Then what was I supposed to do? Stay and keep lying? Stay and watch you choose paths I couldn't follow?" Taehyung's grip loosened. "You never asked me what I wanted." Jungkook let out a hollow laugh. "I was afraid of the answer." The room fell quiet again, broken only by rain tapping against the window and Jungkook's uneven breathing. "You think you protected me," Taehyung said softly. "You think sacrificing yourself makes this noble." Jungkook said nothing. "It doesn't," Taehyung continued. "It just makes it lonely." Jungkook's knees buckled. He sank onto the edge of the bed, burying his face in his hands. "I didn't know how to stay without breaking," he whispered. "Every time I looked at you, I wanted more than I was allowed to want." Taehyung sat across from him, close enough to feel the tremor in his body. "You should have trusted me with that. I was scared you'd look at me differently." Taehyung's voice softened, aching. "I already did, I always have." Jungkook looked up slowly, eyes wide, like he'd been holding his breath for years. "Then why did you let me pull away?" "Because I thought loving you meant not chasing," Taehyung said. "I thought you needed space." Jungkook let out a sob and collapsed forward. Taehyung caught him instinctively, arms wrapping around him as Jungkook cried against his shoulder, raw, unfiltered, exhausted. "I'm tired, Jungkook whispered. "I'm so tired of pretending I'm strong." Taehyung held him tighter, resting his cheek against Jungkook's hair. "Then don't be strong," he said quietly. "Just be here." They stayed like that for a long time. Breath, heartbeat, silence that finally understood them. Eventually, Jungkook pulled back, eyes searching Taehyung's face. "If I stay, everything changes." Taehyung nodded. "It already has." Jungkook hesitated. "People will talk." "They always do." "I might lose things." Taehyung met his gaze. "You might gain something too." Jungkook swallowed. "And if I still feel like running?" "Then we talk," Taehyung said. "No more videos, no more goodbyes recorded in secret." Jungkook exhaled slowly, as if releasing years of fear. "I don't know if I can promise forever." Taehyung gave a small, sad smile. "I'm not asking for forever, I'm asking for honesty." Jungkook nodded, tears slipping down his cheeks again. But this time they felt different. Less like despair. More like release. Outside, the rain began to ease. Inside that room, two people who had been circling the same truth for years finally faced it, bruised, stripped of masks, uncertain but still standing. The goodbye video no longer felt like an ending. The room stayed quiet long after Jungkook's breathing finally evened out. Taehyung didn't move. He was afraid that if he did, the moment would fracture again, like everything else between them always had. Jungkook sat on the edge of the bed, shoulders slumped, eyes fixed on the floor as if it held answers neither of them knew how to ask for yet. "What happens now?" Jungkook asked quietly. Taehyung leaned back against the wall, knees drawn up. The adrenaline that had carried him through the confrontation was fading, leaving behind a heavy exhaustion that settled deep in his bones. "Now," he said slowly, "we stop pretending this never existed." Jungkook let out a weak breath that sounded almost like a laugh. "That's the part I don't know how to do." Taehyung studied him. The tension in his jaw, the way his hands kept clenching and unclenching like he was bracing for impact that hadn't come yet. "You don't have to know how," Taehyung said. "You just have to not disappear." Jungkook looked up at that, really looked at him. "I didn't think you'd come after me," he admitted. Taehyung's chest tightened. "Why?" "Because I made it easy not to," Jungkook said. "I kept smiling, I kept saying I was fine. I made distance look like peace." "And I believed you," Taehyung replied, voice low. "That's on me too." Silence settled again, but it felt different now. Not hollow, just heavy with things finally acknowledged. Jungkook rubbed his palms against his jeans. "There's something else," he said. Taehyung straightened slightly. "What?" Jungkook hesitated. "When you found the video, that wasn't the only reason I panicked." Taehyung waited. "I was supposed to leave tomorrow," Jungkook continued. "Not permanently, just quietly, a break. I didn't tell anyone yet." Taehyung frowned. "A break from what?" "Everything," Jungkook said. "Schedules, cameras, expectations. I told the company I needed time, they didn't argue." That sent a chill through Taehyung. "They just let you." "They said I looked exhausted," Jungkook answered with a bitter smile. "Like I was one bad day away from falling apart." Taehyung stood up slowly. "And you were just going to go without telling me." "I didn't trust myself not to stay if I did," Jungkook admitted. Taehyung exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. "You keep deciding things alone." Jungkook's shoulders slumped. "I know." "You don't get to anymore," Taehyung said firmly. Jungkook looked up, surprised by the certainty in his voice. "If you're leaving," Taehyung continued, "we talk about it together, no hiding." Jungkook nodded. "Okay." The word was small, but it landed with weight. A buzz cut through the quiet. Jungkook's phone lit up on the bed. His expression tightened the moment he saw the name on the screen. Taehyung noticed. "Who is it?" "The manager," Jungkook said, already reaching for it. Then he stopped. His hand hovered. "Do you want me to answer?" The question shouldn't have mattered as much as it did. Taehyung swallowed. "Yes." Jungkook answered, voice steady but guarded. "Hello." Taehyung watched as Jungkook listened, nodding slowly, his jaw tightening with every passing second. "Yes, I understand," Jungkook said. "No, I haven't left yet." A pause. "I'll come in tomorrow," Jungkook added. "We'll talk then." He ended the call and set the phone down carefully, like it might explode. "They know something's wrong," Jungkook said. "They always do." Taehyung crossed the room. And they're nervous," Jungkook replied. "About me, about you, about rumors." Taehyung scoffed softly. "Rumors have existed since the beginning." Jungkook met his eyes. "Not like this." The weight of that settled between them. The reality they'd been avoiding pressed in from all sides: contracts, expectations, images built carefully over years. Taehyung sat beside him on the bed. "Look at me." Jungkook did. "You're not alone in this anymore," Taehyung said. Whatever happens next, we face it together. Jungkook's eyes shone, but he didn't look away. And if facing it costs you something. Taehyung didn't hesitate. Then it costs me something. That answer scared Jungkook more than anything else that night. You shouldn't have to give things up because of me, he said quietly. Taehyung shook his head. You're not a mistake I need to fix. You're a truth I ignored. Jungkook's breath hitched. He looked down, pressing his fingers into the mattress like he needed something solid to hold onto. I don't know how the world will react, Jungkook admitted. I don't know how they'll see us. Taehyung followed his gaze to the window, where the rain had finally stopped, leaving the city washed and quiet. They'll see whatever they want, Taehyung said. We can't control that. Jungkook looked back at him. Then what can we control? Taehyung met his eyes. Whether we lie again. Jungkook nodded slowly. They didn't touch, not yet. The space between them felt important, earned, careful. Outside, the building settled into early morning stillness. Somewhere down the hall, a door closed softly. Life kept moving, unaware of the fragile ceasefire happening in that small room. Jungkook finally stood. I should try to sleep, he said, though he didn't sound convinced. Taehyung nodded. I'll stay. Jungkook hesitated. You don't have to. I know, Taehyung said. I want to. That was enough. Jungkook lay down, turning onto his side, facing the wall. Taehyung stayed seated, back against the headboard, watching the slow rise and fall of Jungkook's shoulders. For the first time in a long while, Jungkook didn't look like he was running. Taehyung stared at the dark ceiling, thoughts racing ahead to conversations that hadn't happened yet, consequences waiting just beyond the door. Tomorrow would demand answers. But tonight they were still here. Morning arrived without permission. Taehyung hadn't slept. He drifted in and out of shallow rest, listening to the building wake, elevators humming, distant footsteps, a city resuming its rhythm as if nothing inside this room had shifted. Jungkook stirred beside him just as light slipped through the curtains, turning the walls a pale gray. For a moment, Jungkook looked confused, like he'd forgotten where he was. Then his eyes met Taehyung's. Reality returned. Morning, Jungkook said softly. Taehyung nodded. Morning. Neither of them smiled, not yet. They moved around each other carefully, brushing teeth, changing clothes, avoiding the mirror like it might ask questions they weren't ready to answer. Jungkook wore a cap pulled low, hands trembling just enough for Taehyung to notice. You don't have to go alone, Taehyung said as Jungkook reached for his phone. Jungkook hesitated. They asked to see me first. Taehyung's jaw tightened. That's never a good sign. Jungkook exhaled. It's not an accusation, not yet. The word yet hung heavy. They walked down the hallway together, steps in sync out of habit. At the elevator, Jungkook stopped. The doors slid open with a soft chime. This is where I go by myself, Jungkook said. Taehyung met his gaze. I'll be here when you're done. Jungkook nodded, swallowing. Don't leave. I won't. The doors closed. Taehyung watched his reflection replace Jungkook's face, then disappear. Waiting was harder than confronting. Taehyung sat in the common area, phone face down on the table. He didn't scroll. He didn't distract himself. He watched people pass, staff members, assistants, each of them carrying their own version of urgency. He wondered how many times he'd walked through this space with a smile while something important slipped past unnoticed. An hour passed, then another. When Jungkook finally returned, his shoulders were stiff, eyes guarded in a way Taehyung had learned to recognize. They want a statement, Jungkook said quietly, sitting across from him. Not public, internal for now. Taehyung leaned forward. About what? About my health, Jungkook replied. About the break, about us. Taehyung's chest tightened. They said that. They didn't have to, Jungkook said. They asked too carefully. Silence stretched between them. They're afraid, Taehyung said. Jungkook nodded. Of uncertainty. Of losing control, Taehyung added. Jungkook rubbed his temples. They want reassurance that nothing will change. Taehyung let out a breath. And will it? Jungkook looked up, eyes searching. I don't know. That honesty felt like both relief and risk. They suggested boundaries, Jungkook continued. Distance, separate schedules for a while. Taehyung's expression hardened. As a solution. As prevention, Jungkook corrected. They said it's temporary. Temporary had a way of becoming permanent. Taehyung stood. He paced once, then stopped in front of Jungkook. What do you want? The question seemed to surprise him. I want to breathe, Jungkook said after a moment. I want to stop feeling like every choice is a performance. And us? Jungkook's voice dropped. I want us to stop hiding in pieces. Taehyung nodded slowly. Then don't let them reduce this to logistics. Jungkook looked conflicted. It's not that simple. I know, Taehyung said, but it starts with you not shrinking. Jungkook laughed softly without humor. You make it sound easy. I make it sound necessary. They sat back down. Outside, sunlight cut through the windows, sharp and exposing. They asked about the video, Jungkook said suddenly. Taehyung's heart skipped. What video? The goodbye, Jungkook replied. They didn't know about it, but they sensed something. I told them it was old, that it was a private note I never intended to share. And they warned me, Jungkook said, about leaving things behind that can be misunderstood. Taehyung's jaw clenched. They want to erase it. They want to control the narrative, Jungkook said quietly, even the parts that never went public. Taehyung thought of the video. Jungkook's tired eyes, the honesty he'd hidden from the world. That wasn't a narrative, Taehyung said. That was truth. Jungkook looked down. Truth scares them. It scares you too, Taehyung said gently. Jungkook nodded. They didn't speak for a while. The building buzzed around them, indifferent. What if I take the break? Jungkook asked. Really take it, step back, no performances, no appearances. Taehyung considered it. They'll fill the silence with speculation. They already do, Jungkook replied. Taehyung met his eyes. And what about me? Jungkook hesitated. That's the part they didn't ask about. Taehyung let out a slow breath. Then answer it anyway. Jungkook studied him. Stay. It wasn't a demand, it was a request. Taehyung nodded. I'm here. Jungkook's shoulders dropped, tension easing just slightly. A notification buzzed on Taehyung's phone. He ignored it, then another. He glanced down despite himself. Trending topics. Their names side by side. No accusations, no confirmations, just curiosity sharpening into focus. It's starting, Jungkook said, seeing the change in Taehyung's expression. Taehyung locked his phone. We knew it would. Jungkook stood. I have another meeting this afternoon. Taehyung stood with him. I'll walk you. They moved through the halls together again, this time closer, shoulders nearly touching. People glanced at them, some curious, some cautious. At the conference room door, Jungkook stopped. If this goes badly. Taehyung met his gaze. We adjust together. Jungkook nodded, drawing strength from the word. As the door closed behind Jungkook, Taehyung remained in the hallway, heart pounding. He felt the weight of everything pressing in, public eyes, private truths, choices that couldn't be undone. For years he'd believed love meant patience, distance, silence. Now he wondered if love meant standing still, while the world tried to pull them apart. Taehyung stayed in the hallway long after the door closed. He didn't know how much time passed. Minutes blurred into something shapeless, measured only by the tension sitting in his chest. Every instinct told him to pace, to do something, but there was nothing left to control right now. Everything was happening behind closed doors. And that scared him more than any rumor ever could. He moved to the window at the end of the hall, pressing his palm against the cool glass. Down below, cars moved like quiet confessions, each one heading somewhere certain. He wondered when certainty had become such a rare thing. A soft voice broke the silence. "You look like you're waiting for a verdict." Taehyung turned. Namjoon stood a few steps away, hands in his pockets, expression careful but warm. "How long have you been there?" Taehyung asked. "Long enough," Namjoon said. "You okay?" Taehyung hesitated. Lying came easily to him. Honesty didn't. "I don't know," he admitted. Namjoon nodded, accepting that answer without pushing. "They called a meeting," he said, everyone feeling it. Taehyung looked back at the conference room door. "He's trying." "I know," Namjoon replied. "We all see it." That mattered more than Taehyung expected. "They're afraid he'll disappear," Taehyung said quietly. Namjoon followed his gaze. "They're afraid of losing control. That's different." Taehyung exhaled. "It feels the same." Namjoon studied him for a moment. "Whatever happens in that room, don't forget this part. He didn't walk away this time." Taehyung nodded. "I won't." Namjoon gave a small, reassuring smile before leaving Taehyung alone again. The door finally opened. Jungkook stepped out, face unreadable. For one terrifying second, Taehyung couldn't tell whether that was good or bad. Then Jungkook's eyes found his and softened. They didn't speak until they were alone again, back in the quiet of Jungkook's room. Jungkook closed the door behind them and leaned against it, eyes closed, as if holding himself upright required conscious effort. "How bad?" Taehyung asked. Jungkook opened his eyes. "Not bad, not good." Taehyung waited. "They approved the break," Jungkook continued. "Officially, minimal announcements, health-related." Taehyung felt a flicker of relief. That's something. But Jungkook added, "They want conditions." Taehyung's jaw tightened. "Of course they do." "Limited contact," Jungkook said carefully, "publicly." Taehyung scoffed, "And privately." Jungkook met his gaze. "They didn't ask." That was the loophole. "They also asked me," Jungkook went on, "what I wanted people to believe." Taehyung sat down slowly. "What did you say?" "That I was tired," Jungkook replied. "That I needed time, that nothing else was changing." Taehyung searched his face. "And is that true?" Jungkook's lips pressed together. "Not completely." Silence fell again, heavier than before. "I didn't correct them," Jungkook said. "I couldn't." Taehyung felt the familiar pull of disappointment, but it didn't settle the same way it used to. "Did you lie?" Taehyung asked. "Or did you just not tell everything?" Jungkook considered it, the second one. Taehyung nodded. "That's progress." Jungkook let out a breath that sounded almost like relief. "You're not angry." "I am," Taehyung admitted. "But I also know you weren't ready to burn everything down today." Jungkook sat beside him, shoulders slumping. "I was scared if I pushed, they'd pull harder." "They will anyway," Taehyung said gently, "just more quietly." Jungkook stared at his hands. "I hate that they know how to do that." Taehyung leaned back. "They've had practice." The afternoon stretched on. Messages piled up on their phones, group chats, missed calls, headlines dancing around what they couldn't confirm. Taehyung didn't open any of them. He didn't need outside voices right now. Jungkook stood suddenly. "I can't stay here." Taehyung looked up. "Where do you want to go?" "Anywhere that doesn't feel like a strategy room," Jungkook said. Taehyung grabbed his jacket. "Then let's go." They left quietly, slipping through a side exit, caps low, steps quick but not frantic. The city greeted them with ordinary noise, traffic, laughter, the hum of life continuing as usual. They walked without a destination. For the first time in days, Jungkook's shoulders loosened. "I forgot what it felt like to just walk." Taehyung smiled faintly. "You used to love this." "I still do," Jungkook said. "I just forgot I was allowed to." They stopped at a small cafe tucked between taller buildings. No cameras, no whispers, just the smell of coffee and the low murmur of strangers living their own stories. They sat by the window. "This feels dangerous," Jungkook said softly. Taehyung raised an eyebrow, drinking coffee. "Feeling normal," Jungkook replied. Taehyung looked at him. "Normal isn't the enemy." Jungkook stirred his drink, watching the liquid swirl. "What if I go on break and everything falls apart anyway?" Taehyung didn't answer immediately. "Then we rebuild," he said finally. "Or we accept what changes, but we don't pretend anymore." Jungkook looked at him, eyes searching. "You're really willing to face that?" Taehyung met his gaze without flinching. "I already am." Something shifted then, not dramatically, quietly, like a decision settling into place. Jungkook nodded once. "Okay." They sat there until the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the street. When they finally stood to leave, Jungkook reached out, just briefly, letting his fingers brush Taehyung's sleeve. It wasn't a declaration. But it wasn't an accident either. As they stepped back into the city, Taehyung felt the weight of what lay ahead, but also something steadier beneath it. Night settled over the city with a quiet insistence. By the time they returned to the dorm, the hallways felt different, too alert, too aware. It wasn't that anyone said anything. It was the way conversations paused for half a second too long, the way eyes flicked away just a little too fast. Jungkook noticed it too. Taehyung could tell by the way his shoulders tensed again, by how his hand tightened around the strap of his bag. "Ignore it," Taehyung murmured as they walked. Jungkook nodded, but his jaw clenched. "I forgot how loud silence can be." They parted at Jungkook's door. This time, there was no hesitation when Jungkook turned back. "Stay?" he asked quietly. Taehyung didn't pretend to think about it. "Yeah." Inside, the room felt smaller than it had that morning. Not because of walls, but because everything unsaid had begun to take up space. Jungkook sat on the bed, pulling his cap off and tossing it aside. He ran a hand through his hair, then covered his face for a moment like he was bracing himself. "I keep thinking they're going to change their minds," he said. "That tomorrow someone will call and tell me I pushed too far." Taehyung leaned against the desk. "And if they do?" Jungkook looked up. "I don't know." "That's okay," Taehyung said. "You don't have to have the ending yet." Jungkook let out a breath. "You always talk like endings aren't inevitable." "Because they aren't," Taehyung replied. "They're choices, or accumulations of choices." Jungkook studied him. "When did you get so brave?" Taehyung smiled faintly. "When I got tired of watching you disappear." The words landed softly, but Jungkook felt them. He looked away, blinking fast. "I watched that video again," Jungkook admitted. Taehyung stiffened. "Why?" "Because I wanted to understand what you saw," Jungkook said. "I didn't remember looking that done." Taehyung crossed the room and sat beside him. "You looked like someone saying goodbye without permission." Jungkook swallowed. "I don't want to be that person anymore." Taehyung nodded. "Then don't be." The simplicity of it made Jungkook laugh weakly. "You make it sound like a switch." "It's not," Taehyung said. "It's a practice." They sat in silence, shoulder to shoulder, not touching beyond that point of contact. It was enough to steady them both. A vibration cut through the quiet. Jungkook's phone lit up again. He glanced at the screen, expression tightening. "They want to schedule check-ins," he said. "Weekly, maybe more." Taehyung tilted his head. "About your health." "About everything," Jungkook replied. They said it gently. "They always do," Taehyung said. Jungkook set the phone face down. "I hate feeling like my honesty has to be measured." Taehyung looked at him. "Then don't measure it with them, measure it with me." Jungkook's eyes flicked up. "You won't always like what you hear." Taehyung's voice was steady. "I'd rather not like it than not know it." That answer seemed to anchor something in Jungkook. He nodded slowly. Later, when the lights were off and the city noise faded into a distant hum, Jungkook spoke again. Do you ever think about what would have happened if we'd said something years ago? Taehyung stared at the ceiling, all the time. And Jungkook asked. Taehyung turned his head slightly. I think we would have been messy, confused, probably scared. Jungkook let out a soft laugh. That sounds familiar. But, Taehyung continued, I also think we wouldn't have spent so much time pretending. Jungkook went quiet. I regret that part, Taehyung added. Not the timing, just the silence. Jungkook shifted on the bed, then finally turned toward him. In the low light, his eyes were serious. If I tell you something now, Jungkook said, you can't try to fix it. Taehyung met his gaze. Okay. I'm still afraid, Jungkook admitted. Not of them, of myself, of how easy it would be to disappear again if things get hard. Taehyung listened, without interrupting. I don't trust that fear yet, Jungkook continued. I don't trust that it won't win sometimes. Taehyung considered his words carefully. Then let me be the part of you that notices when it's winning. Jungkook's throat tightened. That's a lot to ask. I know, Taehyung said. You don't have to say yes tonight. Jungkook didn't answer right away. He lay back, staring up, breathing slow. Minutes passed. Then quietly, okay.